I still have the envelope in a drawer in my kitchen. It's not special to look at, just a plain white envelope. The kind you buy in a pack of 50 at the drugstore. My grandmother wrote my name on the front in her handwriting, the letters leaning slightly to the right the way they always did, and she pressed it into my hands at my mother's funeral and said, "Don't open this until you're ready." I didn't know what that meant. I was 26 years old, standing in the church parking lot in heels that were pinching my toes, and I just nodded and tucked it into my purse and forgot about it for 3 weeks. My aunt found it first. I should explain something about my aunt before I go any further, because otherwise none of this will make sense. She is my mother's older sister, and she has spent the better part of my entire life making sure everyone in the family understood the difference between her branch and ours. She married well, her words not mine, and she drove a car that cost more than my first apartment, and she had very strong opinions about what things were worth and what things weren't. Antiques, jewelry, real estate, people. She had opinions about all of it and she shared them freely, and she was rarely kind. She was staying at my grandmother's house after the funeral, helping to sort through things, she said. I came by on a Tuesday afternoon to pick up some of my mother's clothes that Grandma had kept, and my aunt was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a look on her face like she was doing me a favor just by being there. "Your grandmother left you something," she said before I even had my coat off. She was holding the envelope. "I know," I said. "She gave it to me at the funeral." She tilted her head. "Then why is it still here?" I didn't answer that. The truth was, I had left it on Grandma's table by accident the day of the service, in all the chaos of casserole dishes and relatives and a grief that felt like a low hum behind everything. I hadn't even realized. "I'll take it now," I said, and I held out my hand. She didn't give it to me right away. She turned it over, looked at my name on the front, set it back down on the table. "I opened it," she said. The room went very quiet. "You what?" I thought it might be important, something that needed to be handled. She picked up her coffee cup. "It's just an old document, some kind of account information. I don't know why she bothered." I picked the envelope up off the table. The flap had been resealed badly, a little crooked, the kind of job you do when you think no one will notice. "This was addressed to me," I said. "I'm aware." She shrugged one shoulder. "It's nothing. You can throw it away." I didn't throw it away. I drove home with the envelope on the passenger seat, and I didn't open it until I was parked in my own driveway, engine off, the sun going down behind the houses across the street. I sat there for a moment thinking about my grandmother, about her kitchen that always smelled like coffee and something baking, about the way she called me on Sunday afternoons just to talk, about the last time I saw her before the hospital, when she had held my hand and said there were things she had meant to explain sooner. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper, handwritten, and tucked behind it a card, the kind a financial institution gives you when you open an account. The logo was from a credit union I vaguely recognized, one I had driven past maybe 100 times without thinking about it. The letter was short. It was in my grandmother's handwriting, and it said, "Sweetheart, this account has been in your name since you were born. I set it up the year your mother and I had our falling out, because I was afraid of what might happen to the things I wanted to leave you. Your name is the only name on it. No one else has access. Take the card to the branch on Mercer Street and ask for the account manager. Tell them Irene sent you. They'll know what to do. I love you more than you know. Don't let anyone make you feel small." Grandma, I read it twice. Then I read it a third time. Irene was my grandmother's first name. I had never called her that. No one in the family called her that. She had been Grandma to me since I could speak, and Grandma Ray to everyone else because her last name was Raymond and it had stuck decades ago when her own kids were small. I sat in the driveway until the street lights came on. My aunt called that night. She said she was just checking in, just making sure I was doing okay, just wanted to see how I was holding up with everything. She asked if I had looked at the envelope. I said yes. She asked what was in it. I said it was a personal letter. She paused for a moment and then said, in the particular tone she used when she was deciding something, "You know, your grandmother had some confusion in her last few years. I wouldn't put too much stock in anything she wrote." I said goodnight and I hung up. I didn't sleep well. I lay there thinking about what my grandmother had said in the letter. I was afraid of what might happen to the things I wanted to leave you. And I thought about my aunt's hand resealing that envelope, and I thought about the word confusion, the careful way she had dropped it like a seed. In the morning, I called in late to work. I put on real clothes instead of the sweats I had been living in since the funeral, and I drove to the credit union on Mercer Street. It was a small branch, the kind that still has a bowl of candy on the front desk and remembers your name if you come in twice. The teller was a woman in her 50s with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, and when I explained that I was there about an account and that Irene had sent me, something shifted in her expression. "One moment," she said. She came back with a man in a gray sweater, the account manager whose nameplate said Lawrence. He had the kind of careful face that didn't give much away, but he shook my hand and asked me to follow him to his office, and he closed the door behind us, which felt significant. He looked at the card. He looked at my ID. He typed something into his computer, and then he was quiet for a moment, looking at the screen, and then he looked at me. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "when did you last have contact with this account?" I told him I didn't know the account existed until yesterday. He nodded slowly. "Your grandmother opened this for you in 1992. You were 2 years old." He paused. "She made regular contributions for about 12 years. After that, the contributions stopped, but she left the account open and the funds untouched." He turned the monitor slightly so I could see it. I don't remember exactly what I said in that moment. I think I said I'm sorry, which doesn't make any sense, but it was the thing that came out. The number on the screen was not a number I had ever associated with my own life. It was the kind of number that belongs to other people, to people who grew up differently than I did, in houses with more rooms and fewer arguments. "Is this right?" I asked. "It is," he said. 32 years of growth. She chose conservative investments but consistent ones. Mutual funds, some dividend-paying accounts. It compounded steadily. He folded his hands on the desk. "The account is entirely in your name. It always has been. Your grandmother was listed only as the contributing party, not as a joint holder." I sat back in my chair. 32 years. She had started this when I was 2 years old, and she had never told me. Not once, not even when things were tight and I was waitressing through college and eating a lot of pasta and telling her I was fine whenever she asked. She had never told me. I thought about why. I thought about my aunt, and about what my grandmother had written. I was afraid of what might happen to the things I wanted to leave you, and something clicked into place that I didn't have words for yet. Lawrence gave me a folder with documents and told me I could take a few days to think about what I wanted to do next, whether I wanted to transfer the funds or keep the account open or speak with a financial advisor. He gave me his card. He walked me to the door of his office and shook my hand again. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for a long time. Then I drove to my cousin's office. My cousin Bev is an attorney. She is my aunt's daughter, which makes this complicated, but she and I have always been close in the way that cousins can be close when they recognize in each other something the rest of the family doesn't quite see. She is sharp and careful, and she does not scare easily, and she has been calling to check on me every few days since the funeral. I didn't call ahead. I just showed up, which is not something I usually do, and her assistant let me in because she knows my face. Bev looked up from her desk and immediately said, "What happened?" Not a question. A statement. I put the envelope on her desk and I put Lawrence's folder next to it and I sat down. She read everything twice. She is the kind of person who reads things twice. When she finished, she set the papers down very carefully and she said, "Did my mother know about this account?" "She opened my grandmother's mail," I said. "The envelope was resealed when I got it." Bev was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Okay, here's what I need you to understand. The account is legally yours. There is nothing she can do about the account." She paused. "But I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly. When my mother called you last night, did she ask you anything specific about the account?" I thought back. "You know, your grandmother had some confusion in her last few years. I wouldn't put too much stock in anything she wrote." "She said Grandma had confusion," I said. "That I shouldn't take the letter seriously." Deb's expression didn't change, but something behind it did. She's going to contest the estate, she said. That's what this is. She's going to argue that Grandma wasn't competent when she made her financial decisions, and she's going to use that to challenge anything left outside the will. If she can establish confusion, her word, she can potentially bring this account into the estate, which she would then have a claim to. She looked at me. She opened your mail to find out what you had, and now she knows. I felt cold. Can she do that? I said. She can try, Bev said. But Grandma opened this account in 1992. She made contributions for over a decade. There's a 30-year paper trail. My mother would have to argue that confusion existed going back decades, and that's an incredibly high bar. She paused. It's not impossible. It's just expensive and ugly, and she knows I would represent you, which means she knows it would be a fight. She leaned back in her chair and looked at me steadily. I need you to not tell anyone else about this account, she said. Not your uncle, not any of the cousins, nobody. Can you do that? I said I could. Good, she said. Go home. Don't answer your aunt's calls. Let me make some phone calls. I went home. I did not answer my aunt's calls. There were 3 of them over the next 2 days, each one a little more careful and pleasant than the last, which told me more than any direct conversation would have. On the 3rd day, she came to my apartment. I knew she was coming because her car was parked outside when I got home from the grocery store, and she was sitting on the front steps with her coat buttoned up against the November cold, which was unusual because my aunt does not, as a rule, sit on steps. I've been trying to reach you, she said. I know, I said. I unlocked the door. I did not invite her in, but I left the door open and she followed me inside. She sat at my kitchen table. The same table where, 12 days earlier, I had spread out my grandmother's documents and sat with them until 2 in the morning. And she put her purse down and folded her hands and looked at me with the expression she uses when she has decided to be reasonable. I want to talk about your grandmother's letter, she said. Okay, I said. I'm worried, she said. I'm worried that she wasn't entirely herself in the last few years. You know how she got. The repetition, the forgetting things. She shook her head slowly. I've spoken to an attorney, just to understand our options. I know, I said. Bev told me. A very small pause. She told you. She's my attorney now, I said. Has been since Tuesday. My aunt looked at me for a moment with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It was not quite anger and not quite surprise. It was more like recalibration. I'm not trying to take anything from you, she said. I know you believe that, I said. The estate has to be handled fairly. The account isn't part of the estate, I said. It never was. It's been in my name for 32 years. She picked up her purse. She smoothed her coat. She said, I hope you understand what you're doing, in the tone that means she does not think I understand at all. I do, I said. I finally do. She left. I sat at the kitchen table for a while after, in the quiet of my apartment, listening to the heat come on. I thought about my grandmother at 20-something years old opening a credit union account for a 2-year-old who couldn't understand it yet. I thought about her making deposits year after year, quietly, without telling anyone. I thought about what it means to love someone in a way that's longer than your own life. Bev called the following week to tell me that she had sent a formal letter to my aunt's attorney outlining the account's history and legal standing. She said the response came back within 48 hours, which was fast, and that the tone had shifted considerably. She's not going to fight it, Bev said. The paper trail is too clean, and she knows I'd use every document to show the court exactly what she did with that envelope. I asked what would happen with the estate. It proceeds normally, Bev said. You receive your portion under the will. The account remains separate. She gets what she was always going to get, which is what Grandma actually intended for her. A brief pause. Which is less than she expected. There was a family gathering at Christmas that year, the first one after my grandmother's death. I almost didn't go. I sat in my car in the driveway for 10 minutes, and then I went inside, because she would have wanted me to. My aunt was there. She was perfectly pleasant to me, the way people are when they have decided to be done with something and want everyone to know it gracefully. She hugged me and said she was glad I came, and she moved to the other side of the room. Her daughter, my cousin Bev, sat next to me on the couch and talked to me about everything and nothing and refilled my glass without being asked. At one point during the evening, my uncle, my aunt's husband, a man who has never once acknowledged any tension in any room he has ever been in, asked if I was doing okay financially with everything, since I was still young and starting out. He said it in the kind voice of a person who doesn't know anything and means well. I said I was doing fine. I said my grandmother had made sure of it. My aunt, across the room, did not look up from her phone. I have not touched the account. Not yet. Bev says there's no rush, that it will keep, that I should take time to figure out what I actually want to do with it. She says that's what my grandmother intended, not for it to solve a crisis, but to give me options I wouldn't otherwise have. The ability to choose, the ability to say no to things that aren't right for me, because I have something underneath me that won't collapse. I think about that a lot. The difference between having a safety net and knowing you have one. My grandmother understood something about power that I didn't at 26, standing in a church parking lot with pinch-toe heels and no idea what I was holding. The envelope is still in my kitchen drawer. I kept it. I kept her letter too, tucked inside. The handwriting leaning slightly to the right, the sentences short the way her sentences always were, the signature that I have seen on birthday cards and Christmas cards my entire life. Don't let anyone make you feel small. I think she knew, even then, that someone would try. I think she planned for it 32 years in advance, quietly and without fanfare, the way she did everything she cared about. I think she knew I would be okay. And she made sure she was right.